During this period of uncertainty, we would like to say thank you to all our frontline workers who leave their homes every day so that we can stay safe in ours. We are proud of each and every one of you who go above and beyond to carry out your duties, for keeping us healthy, for keeping us safe. Because of you, we are hopeful for the future. Because of you, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We don't have enough words to express our gratitude for your sacrifices. We can only acknowledge it and say thank you. National Health Mission, Government of Meghalaya.
A very good evening to each and every one of us. I would like to foremost welcome everyone to this special discussion organized by the NHM, Government of Meghalaya, where experts from across the country and in our state as well, we will have a discussion on how all of us can overcome the fear in the midst of COVID-19. Ngai kublai ya baro ki ba don ringkat lang batngi bang priang subha ya pi wei shakane ka special program ka ba da penyat da NHM Government of Meghalaya ha ka ba ringkat bat ki start perkhat bat ki doctors ki ba long ki bala tebet pentebet ha kane ka phang ngin ya kren kumno ngi kum ki breu ngin la ban ngila ban yale persya ya bejing tieng berkejing seir ha ka bayadai bat uknyang COVID-19. I would like to welcome our esteemed panelist, Mr. Truman Basayaumat, who is a psychologist in the District Mental Health Program East Khasi Hills. Welcome, Truman.
Thank
I
you.
would also like to welcome Dr. Dida Khongla, who is a consultant psychiatrist in Suncare, Shillong. Dr. Andrisia Mauyong, who is a consultant psychiatrist in Mimhans, Shillong, Laumali. And a good friend of mine, Dr. Abhinav Chichra, consultant psychiatrist from the Christian Medical College. Once again, I would like to welcome all the four esteemed members, and hopefully we will have a fruitful and meaningful discussion in the next few minutes. Kajing tiang ba kajing seir hagabaya day ba COVID-19 hagabaya day beruknyang hagabaya day ba kajing snotho kajing shitam hagabaya day ba kajing pediang jongi kipat ba ya kajing shitam jing pediang jongi kipat ba ya kajing sumar ba kajing pediang jongi kipat ba hagabaya day ba ketika penilai persya ya COVID-19 kalong ke ba ni ka ba ke ba la pentut ya ka jing ya bet jang ka kam wat kala pen slam ya ki ba bangin yo bangin light lot ngam de khnya te ha ni ka janmet ki don ki doctors bat ki specialist ringkat bat ngi bangin ya perkhat lang kumno bangi kum ki pat ba ngila ban le hakum kani kapor. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and even depression among the general population with regards to the disease, acceptance of treatment, hesitation of treatment, and even vaccine hesitancy. And it has resulted in delay of the society as a whole in getting rid of this disease and return to normalcy. So we are joined by specialists from across the country, and hopefully we will have a fruitful discussion. Before we start off with the questions, even a few days ago, one small 5-month-old baby was brought to the hospital with complaints of fever and breathing difficulty. But the moment the baby was tested positive for COVID-19, the parents straightforward and outright denied the diagnosis, denied that there's a need for treatment, and took the baby home the same evening. This has resulted in the child losing his life at an early stage from a disease where treatment is possible. Uh, we understand that a lot of it is because of fear and anxiety and other issues, and we shall attempt to answer such questions and get to the bottom of it all. So the first question is to Dr. Kongla. We have all seen that there is significant stigma associated with this pandemic. Can you enlighten us all about some important factors that led to that, looking specifically with issues concerning our state of Meghalaya?
Thank you, Dr. Meban, for the introduction and also for bringing to light about issues regarding stigma. Now, from the beginning, when the pandemic started in our state, there were a series of very unfortunate incidents that had happened and which was largely attributed to stigma. And this has led to a lot of negative labeling, marginalization, and even exclusion of people simply because they had the infection. So it is important to understand that stigma is the disapproval or it is the negative attitudes that people develop towards people with certain characteristics or diseases. Now, it went to a point where people's stigmatizing reaction was so severe that they even had negative behaviors for those that were deceased and their family members. So this indicated that there is a strong and a very deep-seated embeddedness of irrational fear and threat that the virus had brought along with it. Now, stigma is mainly caused by lack of knowledge, but more importantly, it is caused by insufficient information. And the common consequence of this is discrimination, which is an example of grave violation of any basic human right. And this, as Dr. Meban, you had said that it has led to a lot of concealment of the infection, delay of immediate treatment, and even refusal to comply with healthy behaviors, which might ultimately undermine the need of solidarity that we need during such a crisis. So there are ways how we can reduce this stigma. As much as we are responsible for stigmatizing and displaying negative behaviors towards others, we also have a role to prevent it. Mainly, number one, it is through acts of kindness, showing empathy to those who have developed the infection. Importantly, speak up against any negative stereotypes. And it is not surprising that negative stereotypes can come even from educated people. So even though they are educated, we have to have the courage to speak up against any negative behaviors that are emancipating from them. Another important point is we should understand the disease itself, and we should understand it by checking information that is very reliable. Apart from this, it is always useful to avoid using certain negative words like labeling a person as a suspect case or patient zero or a super spreader, because these languages might have negative meaning for certain people, and this will then fuel the stigmatizing attitudes. Let us try to practice simple praise, such as saying thank you to someone for, informing others about their contact with a person who's infected, or say thank you for wearing a mask, because this can go a long way if done collectively as a society. And behaviorally, we have seen that if we praise someone for doing something good, we are more likely to do it. So these are certain points on how we can try to overcome stigma associated with the COVID infection.
Thank you. Dr. Dida. So what you are saying is that a lot of a lot of instances that happened in the beginning of the pandemic, which had led to a significant stigma. As I understand, people here still feel that when you get COVID infection, it is somehow their fault. They still believe that that it is something. Some people have gone to the extent of saying that it has brought dishonor to their family. So, like you clearly said, I think it's high time that we as a society we change our attitude towards COVID-19 patients. Thank you, Dr. Kongla, for that answer. The next question is to Dr. Mauyong. What are the reasons you feel are responsible for so much fear, anxiety, and hesitation among the general population with regards to accepting the seriousness of the disease, willingness to test, and health seeking behavior in COVID 19?
Thank you, Dr. Bevan. Yeah, from my personal experience, I feel like COVID-19 has caused a lot of handicap in our life. We have lost our freedom if to move freely, to mix freely, and some has experienced down in business and some have lost our business. And we have been put on hold from traveling and seeing the world. And our daily activities and life has slowed down. So all these has caused anxiety among all the people. So I will include myself also to be in the general public. I feel like we all want to deny the presence of this pandemic. We want our normal life back, what we had prior to the pandemic. And yeah, and then people, when it comes to testing, majority of people, they don't want to test because they fear the procedure. And some of them, they feel like if they go to test and they are tested positive, they fear that especially for those daily laborer, those who are doing business, then they fear that they may have to isolate, their whole family will have to undergo tests, and their family will be in quarantine. So for those daily laborer, they don't want to lose their job. And for those who are doing business, they don't want loss in their business. And some of them don't want to face the stigma, just like Dida has mentioned. And some of them fear that if they are tested positive and if they have to isolate, they are scared that there'll be nobody to buy their grocery and other requirements. And for some, they may be having some physical illness. And if they go to test and if they're tested positive, their surgical procedure may be delayed. Or if it will be done also, they are scared that their family members will not be by the side because they will be kept in isolation ward and their family members will be on quarantine. And when it comes to treatment seeking behavior, majority of the people what I saw, when they have fever, when they have cough and sore throat, or any symptoms which is likely to be COVID, they prefer to go for over the counter medication, because if they go to a doctor, they will have to test, and if they test positive, then they fear that they may be categorized as COVID positive, and they don't want to experience the isolation. They don't want to go to quarantine because they don't want to lose a job. They don't want to experience loss in their business, and they don't want to face stigma. Yes, that's it.
Gitu ka jubab chumpi kalong ko basyai ngan ong hang ne ba kat kum ka request jong ki babun ki bapet ni program kadon ka jing kerpan ba yak e ba ngi kren hang ni an penkala khasi kadang kalong kajing kerpat nak kaliang jonga ya ki specialist panelist ki bodan rengkat bangi lada pila kalong bapin pila ban kren daga kasi ne pin takren daga pareng ru bapin soba wanchu kren lang daga kasi ka juk por ti ha ka ba ikren ni Dr. Mauyong mentan kadau ba kadon shibun kajing tieng kajing kuslai kajing sier aku bayar day bat ni jing shitam bat katahi kala wanra ya ka jing sngo artatien jong kibrio ban wan shakmat ban ong ban tes ba kidon kata jing shitam bakin sha yala dia ban wat ke jing sumar bat hadu ka ba penlong yaki kepada pen shitam shisha ti kawai kadau yong i Dr. Mauyong kalong ba kibrio kisngo ba lada sha ong na sha diagnose na sha ong ba sha lap ba kadai ka COVID-19 ti kandon kajing sha nyo ben ha ki wei pat ki para brio imlang salam ti ya katahi ka jo bi kran ni i Dr. Dida menne ba ngidang dei hi ha kata ka stage ba ngidang snow bakat ngidang kajing snow tieng jongi ya kajing pang covid kadang dai ke bom ya hap shu kajing shisha te kata kala mandai ka wei ba ngidu ya ka kam ka jam ngi du ya ka jing ka kamai ka kaji ha kaju kapor balada test positive ngi snow ba kala ban penlong yangi bangin hap ban sa marwei te katahi kedai ke ba babon balang kibrio kim dakwa satya banya lingba banong ban syong shipos ngi marwei klem ki brio ki ba itu jingai na ki ba et bathon ki ba hing basem kalong ke ba shisha ya bon kibrio na kata daw we babon balang kim wan chakmat ban test ban wa ki jik sumat the next question is to Dr. Truman or to Mr. Truman Baseomat. Managing mental health and well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic has of late become a topic of concern. Which part of society, in your opinion, is psychologically most affected by this pandemic and why?
Thank you, Dr. Meban, for the question. And before I answer to the question that was asked to me just now, first of all, I would like to say that it was a huge privilege and I'm deeply humbled to be here today among all of you incredible panelists who are great achievers among themselves. And I feel extremely overwhelmed to be part of this panel of discussion. And I'm sure that through this program, people will be enlightened and will be getting a lot of information concerning with this program. First of all, I think before answering to your question, I think people, first of all, they should really understand first what is this mental health. Because mental health here plays a very, very important role in every aspects of our life. And we should understand also that mental health here, it focuses on the overall well-being of an individual. So once an individual is able to take care of their mental health, that means naturally we'll see the other aspects of life, whether it's a social life or the spiritual life or any other aspects of life also. You'll see that an individual will be able to cope up with different situations in life. So which also show here that if a person is mentally fit or if a person is mentally strong, it also shows that a person can make a lot of significant contribution. They can also do a lot of, they can perform their day-to-day activities as per as their need or as per as the requirement. And in case if a person is mentally weak or is mentally disturbed, naturally you'll see that an individual will not be able to cope up even with the normal or the basic day-to-day activities like they used to do. So therefore, it is very, very important for every individual to understand what is this mental health all about and why is it very, very important, especially to take care during this time of COVID-19. And when we're talking about the parts or the parts of the society which is deeply affected, I personally feel it's definitely people belonging to the middle class or probably the people coming from there with low social economic background, because they have a lot to do to do with the basic requirements, with the basic necessities of life. So sometimes even for these such people, what happens is that we will see that they will find it very, very difficult even to manage or even to get the to meet the basic the criteria or to meet the basic needs of their everyday life. So that is one section of the people which I feel is definitely being affected. And also we should understand that this COVID-19 itself, it does not affect or it does not target only a specific community or a specific culture or something like that. It can happen to anyone, whether coming from a rich family or whether from, it does not have any differences or any differentiation between the rich and the poor. So it can happen to anyone and irrespective of different age group as well. So it's very, very important that we start taking care of this mental health, and at the same time, because once, like I said from the beginning, once a person is mentally fit, once a person knows how to handle the mental status of mind, that means naturally they will be able to cope up as they go on with the situation. And also, apart from this, we also see that especially during this time, it also has a lot of impact to do with the educational system as well, especially with the online classes and everything, because we know that every parent these days, they would definitely love to provide a good knowledge or a good education system towards their children. But sometimes certain family members, especially if they come up from a low economic background, they find it very, very hard to even get the basic necessity, to even get a smartphone, or even to just get a proper network also to educate their children. So I feel these are some of the parts of the society which is highly affected by this COVID-19 situation.
Kublai shibun ba truman sungtanat ba pila yathu ba pila ongshai ba ka jingkot jingkhia ka jingmut jingpurkhat ka dei ka ba kongsan ba khamtam ha ka ba yadai bat kini ki por ki ba ka don satang ka jing ha baro kiliang nga ba truman ru ila yathu ba ka jingpang COVID-19 ka kta solensar mot kamap iki brio ki beduk kamat iki brio ki brio spa compare lada pidai de na kanu judgement rio de na kanu nyam ka kta solensar ndrei ki ba kham sha kta khambon ki de hi ki brio ki ba kham duna ka yok kot namar haba kham duna ka yok kot haba ka duna sakabam ka di kaduna saka ha ka ba kila ban penbiang ki jingdon kam ki ba man kasngi ka jingkta e ka jingmut jingpurkhat ha kum kini ki bre ka khamjor shisha te khublei ba truman ya kita ga jubab jongpi ngan kli pi sakawai ka jingkli. What are some of the important psychological issues faced by the people in general during this pandemic? Ki kita ki jingpang ki jingkta e ka jingmut jingpurkhat ka ba ki brew hi ki ia kendo but ki shem ha ka ba habangi ya lengba kani ka COVID-19 pandemic.
Habangi ya phai pat shakini ki psychological issues hakabayate bat kani ka COVID-19 lane bat kani ka khlam khat khandai ngiu I baningkong hi hakabayate bat kani ngiu I bat kani ka COVID-19 hi ka kaningkong ka wan shwa kata ka jingtin, where we call it fear. And I personally feel also that it actually stems out from fear, because once a person experiences fear, what happens is that a person will not be able to control certain situations in their life, and so once they cannot really control with this fear, so naturally it leads or it gives the direction to different other psychological issues also which a person can go through, such as anxiety, such as stress, such as depression, or sometimes it can even lead to suicidal thought or to suicidal attempt as well. So I feel these are some of the important psychological issues that we happen to see during this COVID-19 pandemic situation. And apart from these psychological issues which I've just mentioned just now, I also feel, in my opinion, that today, apart from these, I feel that adjustment difficulty, or in other words, adjustment disorder, is also one of the major psychological issues that a person is going through. Why? It's because they will find it very, very hard to adjust or to adapt themselves with the current situation. let us all be aware, and we are all aware of the fact that at the present situation, we are all living in this new normal life where everyone is talking about. So therefore, for certain people, they find it really, really hard and really, really difficult to adapt or to adjust themselves with this current situation. And then apart from that, we also see that sometimes there are certain individuals, there are certain people also who finds it very, very hard and very, very difficult also in terms of adjusting or to comply with the restriction. We see that there's a lot of restriction that has been put across, to protect. It's for our safety. It's for purely for our safety. But sometimes, certain people, because they cannot really adjust, to they feel that there's that the freedom somewhere is being taken away from them. So sometimes they find it really, really hard to even combat themselves with these adjustment difficulties or with the restriction that is being put across the state or across the country as a whole. So I feel that these are some of the important psychological issues where an individual is experiencing during this COVID-19 situation.
Ba cuman pila ban yathu ban kren lingkot da khasi ek wa pi laong mentan ngatrai da yo sngo na sintor jo pi kan kham kibri kan kham sngo thu sha
Hakabayade bat kani ka psychological issues ani ki issues ki bayade bat ka rukam perkhat perdang jongi ki brio ningkong ko bang ong pi ngatrai kan seduction na ka jingting tilada ki brio kimla bante la kam ya la ka jingting ti suki kawan rapat ka kayalam pat kiwe pat ki psychological issues ka bakta hakabayade bat ka rukam perkhat perdang kata kum ka anxiety ka bangi khot ka jing khuslai lani kajing long khuslai lani kajing sngo long khuslai hak bayate bat kajing long jingban jo ka situation jo ka perthei nang ta de teng kawan ra ru ya kani kajing ban khia hak bangi ong hak tin phareng stress namar bale ayu bakimla bakin adjust lani bakin cope up bakani ka situation tinalo jo kata teng kawan ra ru ya kani kajing pang ka bangi khot ka depression kajing pang kajing sngo si kajing sngo diau bat kumju ru teng lana ki beriu kilong ki batlot hadu kata-kata hawayade bakani kajing mo berkat teng kala bani alam ya kiru hadu bakan poi upur baki haban shimno ela kajong kajing im lani bakim kimban si bakin shimno ban dekat no ela kajong kajing im ru di nalojo kini ru sngoba kadi ka adjustment disorder kamot karukom ban ngan ong no haktin khasi adjustment disorder kamot hakabakin pinyasno eladi bat kajing long jingban jong ka pertheiru ngasmo baki ki don kata kajing smo jinja hakabayade bakani ka bentaru namarba bon apneng ki brio kim patma ya kani ka new normal life ka bamenta ba shisnem shiteng eng lai paro khoi apneng jongi ngi im hakani ka jingiem ka badon with so much of ki kindon mo baka ek bangi de ban le ek bangi de ban le dengan snow ba teng ki brio kila ban yo kila ban ma ro ya kum kini ki issues hakabayade bakani ka klam COVID-19
blay ba cuman ni kitu ki kentien ki basyai bat ngangai ba baro ki snow thu ba ha ba ngitieng kan kta bon ki e ya ka jengmot jing khat jongi kelaban penlong yangi bangin khuslai kelaban penlong yangi bangin snow si adu bangin numla syo wat tang ban ya dai bat bangin im ha ka im lang sa lang kum ba kalong menta ti khublai shibon sa shisien ba cuman ngan bo sakane ka jingkli ya I Dr. Mao Yong, how can you help others cope with the situation of fear, loneliness, depression, especially when tested positive and when on self-isolation? Kaya ka bangila ban le, kum ki breo, kum ki paramarjan, kum ki parlok, haba ngiyo I ba habang isyem ba ngi ladiehi ne ki para parlok ki paramarjan jongi ki yo e kita gi jing kum kajing tien kajing smo kenja kajing smo kia kajing smo si bat hadu kata pot ba ki smo ba kajing kut lat kalong hadu kata ba ki smo ba kam mentoi shu wat ban im ni perthairu Dr. Moya
when a person is tested positive and he has to isolate alone, it is very natural for a person to develop some fear, loneliness, and depression. But I would advise to the public that don't think, no, they fear that, some of them, they fear that they may have severe symptoms. Some of them fear that they may die, and some of them fear that they may develop complications. But my advice to the public is, don't think unnecessary for the thing you have not developed, especially if you are asymptomatic. And if you cannot stop the thinking, then you just say to yourself, stop thinking. If you cannot stop those thinking, then you have to follow the coping strategies. There are a long list of coping strategies, but I will tell you only some because of the constraint of times. You have, if you are alone, isolating alone in a room, you have to keep yourself connected. Do a video call with your family member who are present in the other room, or with your friends, with your relative. Then eat properly, sleep properly, exercise, listen to music, dance, and do something useful. You can write poems or poetry, you can draw something, and you can watch your favorite movie. And you can also practice relaxation therapy. This relaxation therapy is like you have to relax all the muscles of your body, starting from the small muscle to the big muscle. For example, I will show you here, like when you do the relaxation therapy, like you have to make a face, count 1 to 20 and relax. Then you flex upward your hands and count 1 to 20 and relax. Flex the elbow, count 1 to 20 and relax. So similarly, you can do for the left hand, and then you can do for the right leg, left leg, so that you distract yourself from fear, from loneliness, and from depression. And if if you are symptomatic, if you are symptomatic, you call the healthcare provider, get the medicine, continue the medication so that you'll be well. Okay, halkin kasi lang ba? Habang dulu beliau nak test positif, kuhaban isolate marway. Kalau naturally, ya baru beri habang kihaban siyang marway and long positive pangin tien. Pangin perkat, oh, let's see, yung ikam, chitong jur, landi yung iyap, landi, yo develop the complications. Then, Ray, wapa nang sige ba, im day ban perkat, unnecessary ya kaega pi samplat, tempat develop, especially at im dan symptoms eh. Di tangbalada mla ban control, ya kita kajing tieng, ya kita kajing perkat, filamen oil di, stop thinking. Dia hagju kaporu filamen follow kita ki coping strategies. Ibun bagi coping strategies rai yang ong tak dia ka kabanikong kadai pihapan le video call bagi bahiyeng la jong pada chekiwe bagi kamera lani filam video call bagi parlok jong pi bagi iet bagi bahiyeng sam, then pamba tiap exercise skap jing rai shat le kanu kaban penklat ya fi nakajing somar way filaban po jing rai ni filaban po story ni filaban draw something ni filaban pet film kiba pi jusmo tanat ban pet mature te pila aruban practice kataka relaxation exercise kembang anak patai mentan apa filaban ban relax yaki muscle yaki domet jong pi adu ki berat hadu ki baher kisdang naga kiti kemik ti umto pinyo hadu arpo dan relax pilem tu pinyo do arpo pi relax pile komdi pinyo do arpo pi relax, then we continue yak ti kadiang continue ki kejat kadiang ka kejat kamon pero kenapa pila aban relax ialah dia, then pila aban practice kata ka imagery pila aban perkadial dia pafidon hangno lani ha beach ka bolong kerja pat badan ka air pengar perkadial dia pidon hangta but ring mensiam jelang Take a deep breathing, exhale. Take a deep breathing, exhale. Lagi ya, hilang pekat yang dia pidon hakadu kanu kakter pidon dikisenti ke kebun, padon ke wahadan. Pekat yang dia pidon hangta kaprep ikemat, but ring mensiam jelang. Ring mensiam penihar mensiam, ring mensiam penihar mensiam. Hakata kerukom, pila aban penila jelde na kiniki, jingting ging so marwe betul. Tanpa habang ya, when we talk about depression, suppose a person is tested positive and is about to develop depression for the first time, you feel like you're having some symptoms of depression, then you should never keep yourself aloof. You should connect yourself with the family members, with friends and cousins, and follow the coping strategy, relaxation exercise, and imagery. And the advice to the family members is like, don't ever leave a person with depression when a person with depression and isolating alone, don't ever leave this person unconnected. You should always do a video call with this person so that you can, if there is any symptoms of depression, it will get noticed at the earliest, and so that you will be able to bring this patient to a psychiatrist and get treatment at the earliest. So, activity, ang hangyakan yung kanina jing sosi, the syong no lada ubriu uyo COVID positive and ula ban yo depression hakin ka banitong. The lada ulu ubriu ko bodon kita symptoms of depression. Juday ban syong marway long syong marway hap isolate marway tang umday ban bu yaldi hak ta kom bandum call chu ino bandum kren chu ino rai uday ban le video call bagi tam ki bahayeng ki bahajan tam ki para equipment para follow ki coping strategies kung bangala batay mentan relaxation exercise. Ye nagalian ki bahayeng ru penjuday ban ia uni ubriu ba si udang sedang yo depression lani ubriu ubaladon depression yo COVID positive ku hap isolate marway penjuday ban ia uni klem da communicate klem da keren klem da ia contact hab ban le ka video call ban rang ba in hab moral support ya ban reassure you and then hagajo ko pot kana ba pinla ban yo ila don kinu ki symptoms ru nang pila ban wanya lamdo yo shiki psychiatrist ban yo bajing sumar ka employ nang ba lada kumno kila ban don ki jingkwa ban suicide ru ngila ban ya dano employ.
Kublai Shibon, Dr. Mauyong gitu gijing pensyai, kiba syai hawa yadai bat kumno ban yale persya gini gijing sngo pair jong gijing mut jing perkat hawa yadai bat kibreu kibala sya test positif. Te kendiat ru kan kerpat yai iba cuman basayomoj hawa menepi la keren ya ka jing sngo tien jing sngo kuslai jing sngo marway jing sngo bomla ban kop jong kibreu jong kipat bapat mendadai le sia tang yaki bala test positif dai kipat ba hi salensa ngaso pin lada pidani ai ban keren kendiat kensot nomor kapor kalaya kendiat kensot ya ke jing kentu gede jing ajing mot napi ya kipat ba pat hakum kini kipat lengkot ba cuma
hakabaya day bat ka message lani ya ka ekalat linti ka ba ki brio ki kila ba kin te la kam ya ladi hakabaya day ba ka jinglong jinman jong ka pat kani ka COVID-19 situation ngasno ka baning kong hi kum ki brio ki don kam bakin engage yelade into different into various activities apart from their regular activities mungkin haban perlu ci syai ka por jong ki habia te ba kam ka jam ka baki don kam bania trei he bania tu ka kam ka baki ju trei man hasmi tina lor jong ka taru ngatrai ka we ka bakong santam bha na du ne ka belak ni Dr. Khongla ha ka bastam jon ka program ba kum ki brio ki don kam ha shisha bakin kiar ha ka baya te bat kani ka stigmatization Namar ba teng nama teng Ibriu kitam sudon kinu kikin ke jing pam kom ki ke jing shit lani ki dadon ke jing jerho lani ki teng Ibriu kila pek khmat lupa ya ki hakarukom ka pam internet te teng ka tu ka jing le chong Ibriu teng kawan ra no itu Ibriu bakin numtur sakram lani bakin numtur sakhmat bakin wat ya takalat kilenti ka bede bakani ka benta tinalor chong kataru ngasmo ba apart from stigmatization, it is very, very important to support, to motivate, and to encourage each other. Because that is the only simplest way where every individual can do it. And it's not difficult. You don't have to wait for a health professional, or you don't have to wait for a psychiatrist or for any other doctor or a psychologist to teach or to do something like that. It's just a matter of how you support the individual concerned, and also by encouraging and at the same time motivating such individual. I think that is also the simplest way to be able to cope up with this situation. And then apart from that, it is also very, very important to stay active, but to stay active throughout the situation. That is by eating healthy food, by practicing, by doing regular exercise and all. And in case if a person is feeling very, very stressful or very, very stressed out, as Dr. Kongla has already show a little bit of that relaxation technique. I'm sure that relaxation techniques also could be one of the major factor which can contribute, an individual in order to be able to cope up with the situation. So, and also we, as individual, it is also very, very important that we start developing these new coping skills, or rather we can say defense mechanism skill. It's very, very easy bagi chia keren mo hakabayade ba kumdu banyarap daladi kalong ke basut bangin chia keren then rementa kumki brio limba gani ka program gidon kam ban smooth ho shai bangi don kam ru menta ban prang tersyang ya ke bangi thmu lani ya ke bangi keren namar bon teng ya ke bangi shios ngo lani ya ke bangi pet lani ya ke bangi puli ka syukut be tang hang tu te hajaka bakan syukut be hang tu ngidon kam tes lani kumno bagi stang ban persyang ban bot ya ke bagi puli ya ke batit penya namar lingba kata ka jingle lani kata ka jing persyang jong ini kan wan rahi ya kata ka kan pelat yang ni kibriu na kata ka jing tieng bat kum juru na kita ki jing khuslai hakabe dei bakan ka khlam COVID-19
Kublai shibun ba truman kumbaki laong baro armud ki expert sementan ba kalat bangin la ban yele persya akaba ngin yada yala ka jom ka jumut jumkat kawai kadai nalade hi bangin penbernya yala di bangin le ek ban pen klet ya kata ka jing snow kuslai ka jing snow tieng akaba dai ka jing pang hakajuk ka poru ka long ka bakongsan baki bahayeng bahasam ki parlok parajor ki para marjan para mapa kin kiru kin don kabenta ban keren ban yarap ban numpun sngau kenja ban numpun sngau si ban numpun sngau tieng ya ki para brio ki ba ngat hakani ka jistam kublai shibon baro arngut. This next question will be directed to our friend from CMC Vellore. You have heard from the other speakers regarding the ground reality of things here, regarding so much stigma which is associated with the disease, regarding so much hesitancy in terms of health-seeking behavior, in terms of acceptance of the COVID-19 vaccine. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of fear, a lot of depression among patients and the masses in general. We would like to ask you, Doctor, if the situation is any different in Vellore where you are practicing.
Thanks for that question, Meban. Well, actually, practicing in CMC, sometimes you think you're in a bit of a bubble. So I can tell you about what's happening in CMC, and I think across Tamil Nadu. From what I've gathered, though people are quite anxious about the vaccine here as well, the anxieties about testing and accepting the diagnosis perhaps are a little lesser over here. What's I think same everywhere is the psychological reactions to just having your whole life turned upside down, which is basically what's happened in the pandemic, and constantly being afraid for your health, not something people are used to. So those psychological reactions we're seeing are pretty similar. But I think just in those two facts, it's a little bit different.
Okay. Thank you, Abhinav. Kumbai ong Abhinav nganchu kusang ban kalakasi. Kibrio siya kajala kaba iitrei haka hospital kaba iitrei ru kidon hi ke jingsno artatien haba yadai ban shimne bom shimne ka COVID vaccine. Drei ha kaba yadai hi bat ke jingsno tho e ke jingpang bat ke jing kwa jong kibrio ban yo e ke jing sumar ha kiwei ki jala jong kari te amda yo I hado kumbalong hange te ban ong ba ngi kin shong ha yen wat shusha ye jing shitong ban ye ba lech ban lech hospital ban yo ye jing shitong kata ka de ek ba ni kim yo I she ki jala. I would like to ask Abhinav again regarding what do you think is the reason why people this side are so hesitant? Or you can even put it another way: what makes people in the state that you are practicing more accepting towards the nature of the disease and health-seeking behavior?
Quite a complex question. People deal with new things the way they've dealt with other new things in their life. That's what I think. So the pandemic is something new. You have to look back at that culture and see how has that culture dealt with very new things, startlingly new things earlier. You also have to see what is the relationship that the people of this community have with the healthcare system already. So again, I'll say that CMC might be a bit of a bubble because we're working in an area where this institution has been fostering trust locally for a long time. That may not be the case across much of the country. So if the government is generally perceived as not reliable, then it's a little difficult for people to rely on them suddenly in this crisis. So maybe that is the answer to why there's some differences in these two communities, but I'm myself am not sure. Maybe the rest of the panel can also pitch into some to help me answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Abhinav. Kay gabay ong I Dr. haba kli balay kaya pair bagi judgment rio hakiway ki jala kilong ki bakloy ban pediang ba kadai ki jing stom ko badon kam ki jing sumar te I ong daga jing snow tu ba kum ki brio hi ni long ki ba long kadong ka jinglong jong ki brio hi ban pediang ki ba thamai khamtam habaya dei ba ki jat ban rio ba pair dal ki jat ban rio ba lada wan ki ba thamai ki long ki ba kloy ban pediang rei ki don ki jat ban rio pat haba wan ki ba thamai ka ba pun kalai ka jing im jong ki sngo ba ka dei ka ba dei shisha ban chi pediang marmar te ka dei ka nga sngo hi la de ba kaba iong ni Dr. Abhinav kadai kaba yaha but ke imlang salang ki pat ba jungi shani ba ngi kum kajat pen rio naduk menshwa hi habang yo yak ek ba smai ngi long ki brio ki ba artaten ngi dap be ka jing artaten ban ong ba what lada kawan na ka sorkar what lada kawan na ki doctors what lada ki wan na ki brio ki ba hakiwe ki kep ngin jindala shania eki hendrai lada dei ek thamai ni kham chenjar mon shania te kalong ka ju hi ka bangi yo I ha ka ba dei bat ka adhar lesi ha ki snem ki ba khamrem ha ba dei bat ka epic ka epic card on shandur bangin la ban yo ban thep vote te ka jing pen na ka liang ki brio jongi shane ka don lupa te dei na ka ta ka daw hi ba ngi ha ba dei COVID-19 ru ngi sa syam ki ki jing te mentang la poi shakawai pat benta jong jing ye kren ki don arngot ki live callers ngan khot iway hadin iway be en kren but ngin saya jubab ni kita ki jingkeli joki yeah. Hello, we will now be taking the callers. Mr. Naresh, is it? Welcome, Mr.
Yes,
Naresh. Please ask your question.
thank you, Dr. Mevan. My question is specifically to do with the children. There are 3 children in my house. And see, this thing, as you have been all sharing, it has disrupted our lives, but also our children's lives. There is a lot of added stress and anxiety. And my question really is, what advice as a panel of doctors will you have for the parents for us to be able to deal with our children right now? Like for instance, we are trying to see, should we stress so much on their studies, knowing that the online classes are not the same as the actual classes when they attend school. So I've been telling my wife not to stress them so much as to break their spirit. Also, they are not able to meet their friends and the physical activities that they regularly do. So, what kind of advice would you have? It could span, over food habits or having some kind of a routine for every day. And what are some of the effects do you expect that the kids will, inadvertently have when they return to school? And will you please work on some guidelines for the teachers as well, so that they teach them, they receive them back to school whenever it is, with some of those guidelines followed, so that we don't break the spirit of our kids?
Thank you so much, Mr. Naresh, for that question. Indeed, COVID-19 is affecting children in a great way. I would request Dr. Maoyong and maybe after that Dr. Chichra to shed some light on this topic as to what should parents and caregivers do to alleviate such issues. Dr. Maoyong.
Yeah. uh, what I feel as an advice to the parent is, if we think of the past where the school start at 9 a.m. and for the kids and ends at around 2 p.m. So that time they had the in-person learning from the teachers during that timing. But now they have to attend these online classes, which I don't think is very regular. It is there sometimes. Only international schools are very regular with these online classes. Other schools are not so regular. What I know. So yes, as parents, we have to do a routine like it was before, and starting from eating time to reading to attending classes. We can ask the children to attend classes, like, because we have to avoid too much of screening time also. So what I say, maybe uh, maximum of like 30 minutes in one section, and then with a gap, let's say max to max around 2 hours in a day, but in interrupted ways, not continuously 2 hours. Then you start the day for the children from like getting up, brush, and like doing some playing times, and then attend the online class. Then spend time. The parents should spend time with children. Don't spend so much time with your gadgets. And then sit together, chat together, exercise. I mean, like, you have to divide the times like it was before. Don't stress too much only on the online classes. Like, do everything as if it was the time before the COVID. And then yeah, we stress on the daily routine, like brush, take breakfast, then play, then attend few sessions of the online classes, then spend time with the parents. I mean, the children should spend time with the parents. And yeah, I think I cannot say much, but I think balanced life should be there. They cannot play outside, so they should play with the children, with the parent also. Encourage them. to play. I mean, like parents should play together with the children, spend time, give them time, and yeah, don't leave them alone. They should feel love, and they should feel that their parents are there for them.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Maoyong. Dr. Abhinav, would you like to add something to that as well?
I think that was an excellent question, and I think a question on many people's minds. What age are your kids? Because the answer sort of depends on it.
I have one waiting for his 10th standard result. There is one in class 9 and one in 8. But I'm really not just asking for my kids. I also know it's happening to so many people here. The parents themselves are trying to see their incomes are disrupted as well. So I am concerned about the mental wellness of the parents as well. But that's a huge topic. I thought at least if we have some guidelines in terms of how to help the kids and some guidelines for what would you advise the teachers when they receive the kids back to school? Something about that will be very helpful.
So, in general, I'd say that children take their cues for how to deal with things, especially new things, from their parents and the adults around them. More true for children, say less than 10 years, and slightly less true as children start going into adolescence. So the first thing you can do definitely for kids of all ages, what's your attitude towards this pandemic? Are you panicking about this pandemic? Your kids are likely to pick up. So that's number one. Number two, and I think you mentioned this yourself, I think this pandemic has proven that we're all creatures of habit. The greatest distress caused actually because of the lockdown was that our regular routines were disrupted to a great extent. So building up a new routine is actually the task for people. So around this life where you're trying to be careful about this infection, what are the new routines you can build up? Things like screen time, I think it's practically impossible to enforce the right recommendations of screen time now that everything is on the screen. So one thing to remember is that those recommendations for screen time were often made for shows, TV shows where you're not interacting with anything. They may not exactly hold true for school. Yeah. So my two recommendations would be this: uh, the way you react to the pandemic is probably going to be a model for your children, and it's important for them to have a regular routine again, a pandemic-friendly routine. And I'd say the same thing for teachers. It's especially when it comes to older kids, you have to first check what's going on in their head. So they're not just going to buy everything you say. So what do they think about the pandemic? What are their worries? I would, if I had to deal with say 50 kids who were coming back to school, I'd start with that. How was your experience? What are you guys afraid of? Is coming back to school like a good thing for you, or are you terrified of it? Just address the reality of it rather than pretending everything is normal. Kids pick up on that very fast. Yeah, that's all my side.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Doc,
Abhinav. Thank you.
Let
Thank
me
you.
come in. Yes, Dr. Meva.
Yeah.
No, I want to say when it comes to guidelines, I think we cannot make it overnight. For guidelines, we have to sit with some group of experts. It will take a week or it may take some time to really frame the guidelines. You cannot just tell just now. We have to sit
Yeah.
and like really frame together.
Sure.
Mm.
I hope
Dr. Mevan, if I may
you, Dr.
ask
Mr. Naresh.
just one more question.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very helpful, Dr. Abhinav and Dr. Ante. The kids ask a lot of questions about the vaccines, and we are not equipped at all to, know what is coming, or is there something for them that's coming, or is it even advisable? Any light you can shed on that? Just a short question. Thank you for accommodating me.
I think that question I will try to address. As per current knowledge, we know that certain things are in the pipeline for children as well. When will they be considered safe enough to be rolled out to the general public? I think only time will tell. But we have come up with a novel vaccine in a period of a few months. So I don't think a vaccine for children is also too far away. And when the time comes when we've seen the studies, the effectiveness, side effects, I think experts at that point in time will be able to provide a better knowledge regarding what is coming. Thank you again, Mr. Naresh. Thank you, Dr. Abhinav and Dr. Mauyong. Ngasukwa ban pentelah kasih kendiat yang ba ikli ba Naresh ikli yang ba kikon long kikna jongi kiru ki syam jing'e ban penkelai ala kejong jing em ha ke bayadai bat kani ke kelam COVID-19 ki hapan syong hayeng ke school kalong lengba ki online classes lengba ki computer ki nong hikai ki kren na jengai ke jing hikai kamdai mar khmat kum bajulong te kalong ke ek ba e shikat dai ki te katkum ba ong ki doctors mentan ki ong ba ki khna khamtam ha ka boye dai ba jingmut jing perkhat jong ki dai kat nang rit ki khna le ka tale ka nang dai ka basisha kalong ba ki pet thu bet ba ki bot diem ke ei ka ba ki kme ki pa ki men ki mama ki na ki le ka jing tieng jong ki ka hiar pateng ha ki khlum ru ka jing sngo jong ki ha ka boye dai ba kani ka khyang jing pang kani ru ka hiar shi ki khlum ka jingmut jing perkhat jong ki te kalong ba ni don ki dong ba ngi kirang ba ngidong kam ban long kum ki nuksa ki ba bhai ki khlom bangin ong ba ngim dai ban pen i ki ba ka dai ek bangin shutieng khlem nong de kata ka dai ek baning kong bar ka ba ar haba kala ka rukom im jongi kirang ba ru bat kala ka rukom im jongi khna ru ngi hab ban hikai ki kumno ban pen bet ya kata kumno ba kin sngo ba hakum kani ka por ka long ka ka babyang lada ngi shong school lengba ka computer lengba ka phone but ka ba but kumno bangin le ba anda kala bet byang ka perthai kumno bangin pen i ki khna ba ka dei ka ba khambha shu ban le byang school te kini ki ba ngi don kam ban sung thu ban shukran kulum not e bor khat ka long ba ngi dei ban long ki nuksa ki ba bha ya ki klong ki ba kin bot ya ki ba ya ki bangi ngi snow ki bangi ngi perkhat ki ngi le we are having in the comment section a direct question to Dr. Abhinav. It says, how can we ensure continued psychiatric care for patients with pre-existing mental health disorders during the pandemic?
So what we've been doing in our institute is we've been leaning into video consults quite a bit, which was not services we were offering pre-pandemic. So we've been trying that. And I think that is what mostly is happening around the country, where people are finding it difficult to go in person. I think telepsychiatry and video consults is really stepping up. There are lots of online platforms to do that. Yeah.
Kumbaong mai bahaba yadai batka jung sumar jung ki brio ki ba don ke jingpang aga jingmut jing kat ki ba don lupa ani kapor hi hap ban le hi kumbale ki ki nongpang mut ladang in la hi ban ya kendo markmat mut role jong ka tele psychiatry ki ong kata kade kongsan. Thank you, Dr. Abhinav. Going back to the discussion, I would like to request Dr. Dida to answer the next two questions. In the new age of social media and digital information overload, do you feel that a lot of this fear and panic is a direct result of it, and how can one deal with the problem? Trong social media, but ki kubor, ki bamla shu, watang banyoru, hatu, ki sngow ba kani kal penlong yang i mangin tieng mangin kuslai but kumno ki brio kin yele ban lat naka jing penting jong kini ki bawan bok.
Okay. So nando bas dang ka pandemic ke internet kala era bahaya ngi nabun kiliang wat na ki school ki classes what ki kom thing jungi te kaya bahaya ni tang baha ka jo ka por ka don kini negative consequences ru ki bun ki breu ki long ki malen baha ban switch on ba ka phone but ban pet yaki websites, but yaki social media forwards, ki ba tho shapang yaki physical health, ba batai ya yaki health ka ba kata perkhat perdan ru mo. So that means even in spite that the internet is helping us a lot, there is a consequences where there are a group of people who keep repeatedly searching for mental and physical health related question and information without verifying the source of the content. They ki websites baki what ikini ki jingtem ki bon na ki kimde ki belong reliable kane kadai ke aka ha kani karo kompan ki yo ki jing ki they get the information that are incorrect kani ka penlongi ki brio ban pen ki smo sier ki smo shap tieng namar ba kumbang ong ki information ba ki yo kim dai ki balong tikna te kani ka create a cycle mo. So when people are insecure about the information that they get and they're insecure about the illness, they start to compulsively check again and again for the information. And then this creates again the anxiety and the distress, creating the same cycle of again going back to your phone and looking at these messages. Information overload kamut ba nila your access than ki information na ke internet hado bang ngim la ban pediang kano kadai kebab dai kano kebam dai te kani kadai ke ka side effect jong ka ni ka khlam COVID-19 ka WHO ru kala kren na basai kala ong ba hoi ni dai ban yele persya na kani ka khlam COVID-19 tang bangi ru ni dai ban yele persya na kani kabaki khot ka infodemic kata kamut ba nilaya bon than ki jing tip na ke internet te kane kala pen ling a yingi ki briuru. So we have to fight the infodemic as much as we fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Tamba ki don ki lar kilenti kumno bangin pen dunai kane ki jing ling a jungi na kini ki excessive forwarded messages lane ki false information ki circulate media mo kabanang kong ni dai ban tip na kinu ki websites ni nuad ga ya ki jingtip ni dai ban wad ki jingtip bonsin na ki websites ba penmi daga sarkar lani da ki batho de ki medical professionals lani de ki organizations kum ka WHO lani ka UNICEF. So we should be smart on how and where we look for our information from. Look from trusted websites, those that have reliable, high quality, balanced information, mostly government run websites and those written by medical professionals and those that are being published by organizations such as World Health Organization or UNICEF. Sakaway, kumba ongi Dr. Andrea ba ni day ban limit ka screen time ni day ban bo kapor namar ba ka don kapor ka aka ni tip ni kata te ni day ban limit ya ka timing ha ka ba ni pet ya ki media ki social media ki internet they create a routine you make a routine that from this time to this time I will access news from this source. And from this time to this time, I will connect with my friends. Te kini ki steps bangila ban penduna ya kini ka jingling from this information overload.
Boleh shibone Dr. Khongla ya kata ga jing pensyai aku bayadai berka kumno ba kibreo kin shim ya ke ek babhana ka social media ba ka jo ka poru mdai ban ailat ba kanda bon palat kapun klumar ka jung khat jung ku boleh shibone. The next question I would like to I'm getting one from Mebada Lingdo. I'd like to direct this to Dr. Abhinav. How to create a COVID child friendly environment. Many children are facing fear and anxiety. Can we think of maybe pictures or videos that can leave a positive impact in the minds of children?
I'm personally not aware of these resources, but I think if you look for them, probably the CDC, Center of Disease Control Atlanta, has some videos for children. They usually come up with these kind of resources.
Okay, but
What you can do about this is sit down and have a talk with them in which you acknowledge you're also afraid. I'm also feeling a little afraid. I'm also feeling a little anxious. Are you? Then talk about how are you dealing with your fear and anxiety, and get that out of the child. I think even what Dr. Daida was speaking, those are the essentials of managing something that's new. For children, you decide your model first, work on that, and then have a discussion with them about it. When they see you doing this, when they see you controlling your anxiety properly, that is the best model for children. And come up with a daily routine that you think they'd be able to follow for, say, the next year or the next 1.5 years. Something long term is what I'm saying. So if the current routine is leaving them bored and irritable, then it needs some tinkering. Some things need to be added or subtracted over there. That's what I would say.
yeah. Thank you, Dr. Abhinav. Apa ya dai bat kat jikli be pa ikong me bada lengdo hatu ngila ban le ek ban pen sngan ki khlung ban yin pen per ya kar kom im chung ki khlung kin kham sngan ya ni ko por ka jubab ko yut ba yo kalong ba ki ki videos ki dur ki bangila ban page na ka CDC website hado umta ha ko ba dai bat ka ba shna ha rila jong yam ta kam padon kumbongi Dr. Mawyong ngit kin sedang don kin nang pen kre kita gi rek ba kham kong san kan long ba lada ngi yo I ba ki klong jongi ki sngo ba ki don ki jing sngo ear ki jing sngo tieng ngi don kam ban ya kren shai bat ki ban ong pet ke ta ko pen ear pi ngiru ngi sngo ear ke ta ko pi sngo pi rek de ka ne ka bangi ngi le khnang bangin lat na ta ngi le ka ta kum no ngi pen per ke kom im te si sien ba ngi ki rang ba ngi la ban sngo thu shai ke bangi ngi le ya la de ha bangi sngo ear ha bangi sngo tieng da ko bangi ya kren da ko bangi ya ngi le ki ban pen klet ne ni jing shitam kata he kan yara ya ki khulum jongi bara thank you, Dr. Abhinav. The next question also I'd like to direct it to you. How should one deal with the death of a loved one in the COVID scenario? How can one console friends and family who experience such unimaginable life events? Ngan kali sa kuwe jingkli Dr. Abhinav, kumno nginle aba ngidu no yailai jong iba bathon uh, 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 ha ka jingpang COVID. But let's say kumno lada kam jayangi ka jayaki parlok para jot bhayeng bhasem ke ka kamram jongi ke ka bangingi dai ban le khnang ban la ban puntengen ya kita kipa ya ling ba kum kita kum kini ki jing Dr. Abhinav.
Yeah. So I think where this answer needs to start is by understanding that grief is a pretty individual process. So people deal with grief in ways that they've dealt with difficult things in their life throughout their life. It will be influenced by that. So the range of what could be considered normal grief is pretty wide. So I would say that the first thing that people who are concerned about people in their life or themselves who've gone through grief is to know what would a doctor consider pathological grief? What would we consider a grief that is not normal? So anything that is causing very objective problems in your health, you've lost a lot of weight, you've not been able to sleep for several weeks now, you are unable to carry on just day-to-day activities of life, day-to-day living that we all need to do, would be the common indicators that things are heading into troubled territory. If the initial reaction of grief continues for more than a year, though the cutoff is 6 months, but I'd say more than a year, again, you need to be a little worried. And of course, if you see some signs of some serious mental illness, talking to yourself, having irrational fears, there again, you need to be worried. Now, if you don't have any of those red flags, the way that this person is going to be going through this process is going to be individual. You probably should not enforce ways that they deal with grief. Let them do it on their own. As long as they know there's support available, and as long as people are watching for this grief heading into complicated territory. So if that happens, that's when you start intervening. That's when you start asking, hey, how have you been dealing with grief? What have you been doing? Have you been talking to someone? Do you need some help? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? At that point, you need to intervene. Till then, I would say support and watch is what works for most people.
Thank you, Dr. Abhinav. Haba yadai berkatu kecing keli mga keli mentan Dr. ila keren syah ba ni kibreu bang ya ling ba kijing sngosi ba kijing ngi don lala kijong ki rukom bangila bangi don kam man ya ling ba shwa bangin yo kijing pun kia agam sim don kibreu kiba yam don kibreu kiba kwa bandon marway te kabadon kam kalong iki bahayeng bahasem kadai ban ai mensiem ban don rengkat bat kita kibayat yang ba kita kijing ba lada kim don hi kanu kejing yoi ngidangim yoi hi ba kita ki ba sngosi kile ki ba kalong kejing tiang kalong alam sign bangila ban om te ngim don kam banda ong ban penbor yaki ba kunle yak ba ngingi sngo dei ban le te lada kiyam kam dei ka kamram jungi ban ong wat yam sho lada ki spwa ban shong marway sipor kam dei ka kamram jong ki ba et pathan ban ong kim dei ban shong marway ba pi dei ban wan shong bangi kemudian kam kalong tang ban sngo thu ba don ba pet ya kita ki parlok kita ki bahayeng don ki ba pet ba yo kata ka kelajing sitam no lada ka kelajing sitam ba kimbam chu kila sedang hiar ga jingkia kila sedang ban keren merway kila sedang yo iya kirngai dei kata ka por ba le se kata ka jings no si chomki kala pan kamlong shu ka ba ngi dei ban shu marway ngi dei ban ngi ban ailat ki kan nang jur dei ka por ba ngi dei ban kli ato pidon kam jing yarab ato pidon kam bangi dei ban le ato don kam ne bangi kendo counselors don kam ne bangi dia bangin let shim dawai. Thank you, Dr. Abhinav, for that. There is another specific question to Bat Truman. Throughout this COVID-19 pandemic, people are being exposed to various heartbreaking and difficult scenarios, many a times resulting in situations causing a lot of grief, a lot of guilt, regret, and shame, such as the loss of a loved one or the guilt of not being able to take care of a loved one due to being separated from them in quarantine or isolation. What can be done to alleviate their distress?
Answering to the question on grief, first of all, I think we should understand that grief here, it is a reaction to a situation which is something which is very, very sad, something which is not really, something which is not really nice. So here, what I can say is that first of all, we should understand that life here, it comprises of both birth as well as death. So that is life. Everybody, we have to pass on these two stages, that is birth and at the same time death. So therefore, what we have to do is that in certain situation or in certain circumstances like that, when we have to deal with the loss of a family member, the first and foremost is that we need to accept first the situation. Because if we are not able to accept the situation, that means it becomes very, very difficult for an individual to move forward in their life. And it also, like Dr. Abhinav was just saying, that it becomes very difficult for them to even cope up with certain situations in their life. So therefore, it is very, very important to accept first the situation and deal with it in a proper way. Because it is only by accepting the situation and deal with that particular situation in a proper way, then only you will be able to cope up with this certain situation. And also we should understand, I understand that sometimes for me it's very, very easy to say this, but for those family members who have met or who have encountered this kind of situation, I know it is very, very hard and it's very, very difficult for them. But then at the end of the day, yes, I understand there is pain, there is anger, there is frustration, there are so many emotions that comes along with it. But at the end of the day, the only way that you have to be able to cope up with certain situation is just by accepting the situation and go along with the flow in order to bring out the balance in life. And if a person, or if any of it you cannot, you find it very very, very hard, or you find it very, very difficult to cope up with the situation, of course, as Dr. Meban said just now, there are available counselors, there are available psychologists who is more and ready, to give some kind of help or some kind of treatment towards such family members. So I think this is my answer to the question.
Thank you so much, Truman. It is actually very evident to see that a lot of the things that take place, the things that we have instituted, our practices, and a lot of our restrictions are in fact doing a lot of damage mentally to patients and to people living in the society in general. So maybe it is time to rethink current isolation and quarantine practices, so that the mental trauma that is made to people in general can be minimized. Because we are seeing that patients are being treated alone in the hospital when the relatives have already been exposed to patients. So certain people are saying that if the exposure has already happened, why should the patient be alone in the hospital? There's no added risk. So all these things maybe we need to reconsider. Hakabaya day, but ki ba ngi la ya ling ba ngi snow ba nadong shadong kabala ja but ki jing ki bangi ngi yakndo ha kene ka pandemic kala long shisha yangi bakan kta ya jingmot jing perkat jongi ha borok kiliang te hatu ngi don kam man perkat shushu ya ke ba nanglish kmat ban ong ban pet yang sa shisien ya ki kendon ki kita ki jing jinglong pikir ban ong ba bangin la ban le ya ke ba anom kta than ya ke jingmot jing perkat jong ki pat ba hi borok. The next question I would like to request Dr. Kongla to address. Our frontline workers, especially the medical staffs, have witnessed a great deal of suffering and death. What are the mental health issues that might result from the same? And what do you suggest that we do in order to prevent and overcome such problems? And ong da kakasi, ki brio, ki basumar, ki badai, ki bahakamat basumar, yaga COVID-19, yaga jingpang COVID-19, ki haki hospitals, haki clinic, ki layo shisha, yaga jing jang ki brio, kila yaga jing shitam, kila yaga jing yap. Te hatu kini kani ke jing shem jong ki kapenlong ne yaki bakin kamlong kin kamlong bakin kam don chance ki kam ki la ban yo yaki jing pang bakta yaki jing mot jing perkat but hatu don ne ba kum ki ba sumar yaki nongpang ngila ban le khnang ba ngiru ngila ban sumar yala de kam tam haka jing mot jing perkat. Dr. Kongla.
So, Dr. Meban, mostly in any disaster, it is always taken care by our frontliners, and which includes our healthcare workers. And the bonsin ngim jubo kani ka jingkali kumno ka perkhat perdan jumki kalong kumno namar bang issue perkhat ba okay, they are taking care of us, they should be fine. Tamba bonsin ki don kato katne they express overwhelming exhaustion, feelings of detachment from the job that they're doing. They feel a sense of ineffectiveness while performing the job. Kim la man concentrate laki trei, what laki trei ro kismo don ke ek bak duna haki. So they feel this lack of accomplishment. They kane kade ke ek anda kila lep hai shayeng pat ki salong shapting yo ki spread you new infection shala ki khon ne ki family hadin kata ki don kato kat ni ki be express ba ki miot thia yo dem ki shapting ke banja namar ba ki bun ki guidelines ba mi ka ban mi ki sngi ki bun ki rules ki ain ba mi te kane kade ko be ka ba long pan shapting ye ki now pen ka jing shapting the jingling ke balong halor mo. It's the tip of the iceberg. But what we need to address is the real problem. The real problem mainly health workers experience is they suffer from a role conflict between their role as a professional and their role as a parent when they go back home. Hajing tray ho oi ki day ban pendep kat tu kat ni ki kendon ki kam ki jam jong ki tangba dakila like shaying but kila long different individuals. Tekini different roles ba ki play kalong penkul mari ki jing mujing per khat jong ki. There's a main issue that happens most commonly that health workers are most vulnerable to is something called moral injury. Moral injury is something when a healthcare provider, usually they are repeatedly expected in the course of providing care to make certain choices or judgment which is against their moral beliefs. This is especially most in doctors who have to make life-threatening decisions, doctors at the ICU or maybe surgeons. So, they suffer a lot from moral injury, and this causes a lot of guilt and shame which cannot be expressed, and this guilt and shame causes profound psychological distress. So these are the issues we need to address with our healthcare workers. The kaibang nila ako kinikipor is number one, initially seek informal support. Kamna ibada ngisngo kini ki aka bangin like directly shiki psychiatrist ni ki psychologist. First ngila ban share but ki para log para jor lane ki colleagues banya trelang lane ki chaplains ki pastors ki badan hospitals shipang kini ki aka bangisngo namar ba most of them they are not up to a level ban ongba they are disorders mo. So, hadin bang yu bang these informal support is not helping them. Hakatu kapur ke nila ban refer ki professionals to get their help, especially when it's like Dr. Avinash has said, especially when it affects your daily functioning, and especially your appetite is involved, your sleep is disturbed, and you are not able to make decisions in your workplace. And another thing which we can incorporate is maybe in the workplace, we can have more of motivational and moral boosting programs. And these are the issues which we can incorporate in healthcare systems to prevent the mental health deterioration of our healthcare workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rida, regarding that. Very clear, very concise, very precise, uh, encouragement and guidelines for us healthcare workers who are dealing with this COVID pandemic. It is actually a very difficult time for us. Like you said, all the things that you said actually it brings back all the memories of of battles that we never won. Thank you so much for that. I hope if there are any healthcare workers watching the show, I hope that you have received a little bit of clarity regarding what should be done and during this difficult times, that we also need to take care of ourselves as much as the patients that we are treating. The next question is to Dr. Abhinav. One question says, "What would 1 minute? What is the reason for the distrust?" Sorry. What is the reason why people don't trust the vaccine? Means what is the underlying thing as to why people do not trust the vaccine? I think you got my point.
Yeah. So actually, I saw that question, Meban. See, basically, people have a range of reactions to anything very new. Then telling them to stick it into your body, it's absolutely new for an illness they've just recently been introduced to. There will be reactions of fear. So I think, in fact, one of the questions asked anonymously was, what should we do as frontline workers when someone is not believing the vaccine? What do we do next? Generally, the guidelines for having a conversation like this, where someone of the person you're talking to is just completely blocking or opposing your point of view, is to ask them an unexpected question. So how I would deal with that situation is I'd ask them, all right, you're hesitant about the vaccine, you don't believe it, I get that. What will it take for you to believe it? What kind of evidence would you like? What kind of things would make you change your mind? Often people don't have answers to that question. Then you just let them think about it a bit. And that could be an opening where you could start then talking about the evidence behind the vaccine. If usually a frontal assault brings out lots of defensive reactions, people get quite aggressive, being defensive about that at that point.
Thank you, Dr. Abhinav, for that very different approach to things. Kadang ke jingkeli, ba ikeli, iba iba iong, ba I ide iba tray po ke health department, ikwa jing pensyai kumno, ba haba ngila pensyai kat ni, ke ai syusyu ke bangila ban le, bangin la ban pensyai, bangila ban ong, bangila ban kentu ya kibriu, bakin ngej haka vaksin. Te kat kum ka jing ong jong I Dr. Abhinav haba ngi ka sorkar bat ki doctors ki hospitals kila ong ba kadai ke ai ka ba ka ba baha ban sim ka vaksin ndai ki brio ki dang kwa syu ya ka jing kentu ka jing pen hun te kalong ka ba satia ndai ka ai ka bangila ban keli ya ki ba kalong hatu ke ai ka baki ki kwa but ke ai ka baki don kam bakin snow shingan ya ka vaksin mut ke ai syu ka baki dang kwa ban don kam ka baki kwa ban pensyai ke ai syu ka baki dang artatien hawa ya dai vaksin but haba bon palangi ngisem kin shem ba kita ki jing long kim da don hi ka juba ban badai nak bang akwa bang anyo I ya kata dai ka dai tang ka jing tieng na po but haba bon ajing tieng na po but ka jing bom snow wa ban ya ka vaksin we
Dr.
ajan
Meb-
koi ko
Dr. Meban,
ya
awesome.
ya
Uh,
ya oh ya
from my personal experience, like I took the vaccine on March. After taking the vaccine, then around May, yeah, I got infected with the virus, but I had very mild symptoms. So, from my personal experience, long ako on ba, after you take the vaccine, even if you get infected with the virus, you should not be scared because you will not develop serious symptoms. You'll have only mild symptoms, or you may not have symptoms. So that message should be convincing the people that they should take the vaccine.
kublai Dr. Ngoyong kumbai ong mai ba mai ru ila shimyau tika ba ba ila yo ai kajing sistem iklam da sistem jor setia te kata kadai ai ka ba ban penlong ki bre ban so ba shim ka vaksin dai ban tiang dan dai syu haba ni perkat jelew ya kani long ka ai ka bai ong Dr. Abhinav ka long ba what lada ki bre ki la tiplut ni kita ki itip wala dala shim yo vaccine la yo pang injur shu itip man da shim yo vaccine ban yap na ka jing sistem kaduna bha itip ba ka jing se pyang dong pyang ka kham duna la dala shim yo vaccine ndai halor ka jing tip kita ki ek ro fa bu kadang don hi ka jing arta ten ban ngej ba ulong be ba tre kam shisha te kum bai ong Dr. Abhinav ka approach hi ka bala bani rap ulong ban kli hi na kito ki bahayeng bahasam jami ibai ban kili ka ai ka ban penlong yo ki bapin hun ya ka jing batai sa ka ai pidan kam ban bapin mangin pensyai ban ong ba ka dai ai ba don kam te pun sien lada ngila kali kumta lada ki don ki jingar tatin lada ngila ban penbai te ka ka jing diang yang vaksin kan bakam so the next question maybe two more questions I will take up I would like to direct this question again to Dr. Abhinav. Does excessive fear and panic pose any additional risk for a patient who is being treated for COVID-19 disease? Hato ke jing tieng ke bom long shu atau ke jing ke jing khuslai ke la ne em ban penlong ya unong pang uba syak sumar ya COVID-19 ba kan kam jur penban ka jing shitap. Dr. Abhinav.
So I would say, Meban, that the most direct way that that fear and anxiety is going to affect that person is that fear and anxiety is when people make irrational decisions. So when that fear and anxiety is about a healthcare condition, they are likely to make irrational decisions about their healthcare, like not getting it treated, which will complicate the whole illness. Anxiety itself is unlikely to physically kill you, but the ways it affects your life can. So if because of that you're not taking care of yourself at all, you're not stepping out of the house at all, the anxiety is so crippling that every time you go to the market and see people, you're having panic attacks. That all of those ways you've changed your life, that will increase the chances of lots of other problems. But I'd say the most direct way that anxiety will cause you problems in the COVID pandemic is you're more likely to start double guessing everything your doctors are telling you and not get treated because you're anxious.
Thank you, Dr. Abhinav. We are also seeing, a lot of patients who do not cooperate with treatment because of excessive fear. They would actually require some non-invasive ventilation, but because of excessive fear, they will just not tolerate it. They will not get themselves to accept the treatment. So what you're saying is very true. It does affect treatment in a larger proportion. Kumbuyong i Dr. Abhinav iong ba lada ke jingtieng ke jurpalat. Bun sien na ke jingtieng hi wat lada fiyo pang COVID tu ban ong ba hadu bakan shim ya ke jingim jong pi bun sien kam long ke ke ba ngiyo i bor rei lada ke jingtieng lada ke jingkhuslai kalong sya ka bomla ongsho jing tepat kalong sya ka pen long yang i ba ngin le ki ba lada ngim ting nginom le satya lada ngipang ka misu ka ko klem jing tieng klem jing perkat in lech hospital nginong doktor ngikwa ya ka dawai masuk ka ko anrei haba ka jing tieng ka jur pelat ka penlong yang i bakarai jongi ha ka boye dei bat kumno ngin le haba ngipang kata ka penlong ka penlong ka ki mau jentut ki penlong ki ding pengkiang yang i banyo ka jingkot jingkhia kumba ngaru ngayo iya ki nongpang habang sumar yaki hapo ki hospital kito ki bakam jor ka jingteng bonsin ki mla wan sha ya ki jing sumar lada ai oxygen ki bengno lada ong bakin thia bakin ki than ki mla ban le satya ki tanamar ka jingteng long kai ka ba jor te ka dei shisha ban ong ba haba ka jingteng kala jor palat kala ban kta yangi haba ngi pang ya ka ngiyo ai ka ni ka jingpang COVID-19 te one last question to Dr. Dida Khangla. We have gone through about a year and a half of this pandemic, and you have been seeing patients continuously from that time. Can you just share a few experiences from your practice, which you feel is, very peculiar to the COVID-19 times, and which are very different had the same condition been encountered years ago?
All right. So you see, from the beginning of the pandemic, we at Suncare, we anticipated that there will be a surge of new cases of mental health problems that would come to our OPDs or maybe get admitted. But surprisingly, just a handful of new cases were COVID related. Just a handful that were directly related to the COVID pandemic, and the distress was so extreme that they had to be admitted. It was a very insignificant number. Most of the cases were those that relapsed. They were old cases, cases of mental illness, old cases who relapsed because because of the lockdown. So that was the one thing we had noticed at our center. And so what we had done is we went to certain districts to deliver the medications, and so by the second wave, we saw that the relapses of the mental illness somehow decreased because we were able to go and deliver the medications. And most distressing mental illness that arose out of the pandemic were actually just mild cases which could be handled just by counseling, the talk therapy. So that was something that we had noticed at our center over the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dida Kongla, for that clarification. One more question from Mr. HML Natep. Dr. Meban ya kito ki badan anxiety disorder hatu ni virus ula man penjur ya kejing stam. Te ban jubab ya kata ngathrai Dr. Abinafri la batai ba lada kejing ngosi kejing tieng kejur palat kejing wan jong kibriyo hospital kejing tre jong kibriyo ban sya sumar habaki yo COVID-19 kalong ke ba ngimla ban bangimla ban tip ti ha kata ka rukom hi kajur kajing shitam COVID kalaban kamjur haki tapi dapat nakawai galyang ru lada kibriyo kibodan lupai anxiety problem kibodan lupai ke jingtieng kabamlang shu nadu mensuaru te lese lada kiyo ayuneu COVID ataru kan penlong yakiba kan long penlong yakiba wat lada kim shitam no COVID ru kata jingtieng kalaban kiyo shushu so kadai ke ba don kambangin yalaban balance lang. Now I would like to wrap up tonight's discussion. I would like to bring everyone online again, and I request each and every one of the panelists, if they have a single take-home message for our viewers tonight, what would that be? We'll start with Dr. Dida, Dr. Abhinav, Dr. Maoyong, and Mr. Truman.
See, Dr. Meban, any disaster, any pandemic, there will always be an end to it somewhere down the line. So the trauma doesn't last long. There are also positive stories that we have missed. There are positive stories that came out of the pandemic. So my take-home message is focus on the positive stories, have hope, and inculcate and try to develop feelings of gratitude, hope, and empathy, because these are all positive emotions which can help us get through difficult times. So that is my take-home message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Abhinav?
I would say I agree with actually everything Dr. Daida said. I would say if people are struggling with coping with the pandemic, look back at your own life and ask yourself, in other times that were difficult, at other times that were stressful, what helped? And try to include that into your schedule in a pandemic-friendly way. I'd like to repeat that I feel personally that it's been sort of conclusively proven in this global pandemic and worldwide lockdown that human beings need routines in their life. So focusing on what is your pandemic routine? What is your new normal routine? That if that routine is not satisfying for you, you need to work on it. And the third thing I'd say is, well, we're surviving a once in a century event, hopefully. So everyone can be a little kinder on themselves. It's okay if you're finding it a bit tough to deal with it. It's a pandemic. No one's dealt with this.
Thank you, Abhinav. Dr. Maoyong? We cannot hear you. Please unmute. Dr. Maoyong, can you please unmute yourself? We are not able to hear you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Before I give the take-home message, I would like to add some point what Ida shared about the cases in care. So in our case in Mimhans also we had a lot of relapse due to we lack of daily psychiatry. So lately a lot of patients came back because they lack the follow-up checkup. And due to this pandemic and due to lockdown, one patient experienced loss in business, and this patient developed depression with psychotic feature. So yeah, that is what we experienced. And when it comes to my take-home message, is like I would like to tell the people: be aware that this pandemic do exist, so that you can take precaution like wear masks, wash hands, use sanitizer, and maintain social distancing. But do not think about this pandemic too much. Don't fear. Don't watch too much news about the pandemic, and don't let this fear get inserted into your mind. But if you cannot control the fear, then just follow the coping strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moyo. Mr. Truman, let us hear you.
Well, to end this program, I would like to end this take note, I mean, a whole message is just by these three things. Number one is that every individual, like I said from the very beginning, that first and foremost, they really need to take care first of their mental health, because mental health here has is very much associated with these three domains of our life, which is our thinking, our feelings, and our behavior. So if these three domains of our life is properly being taken care of, I'm sure we will be able to battle and we will be able to come out of this pandemic situation very, very easily. And then secondly is that I also feel that individual responsibility is very, very important at this point of time. I recently read a quote somewhere which says that being human is given, but keeping our humanity is a choice. So let's choose humanity, that is by adopting and by practicing this responsibility. Whether when I'm saying adopting this individual responsibility, either by getting themselves vaccinated or by getting the correct information in order to overcome the fear as the topic of this discussion today, and also by following the protocols as well as the restriction, because whatever we are going through at this point of time is definitely for our safety. So once we start adopting this individual responsibility, I'm sure we will be able to fight together and win this virus, win this pandemic together. And lastly, I would also like to end on a note that in case if any of the individual, they find it very, very hard or very, very difficult to cope up with the current situation that we are all in today, please remember that they can directly call to this toll line help number, which is 14410, where they can get any psychological treatment or any kind of treatment which is available for such individual. And apart from that, there is also a psychological support unit in every district of the state, where anybody, they can seek their psychological support in case if they find it really, really hard and really, really difficult to combat with this COVID-19 situation. So these are the only three messages which I would like to share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Viewers, just remember that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Make a new normal. Make a new normal. Try to cope with your problems. Do not fear. And please take care of your mental health, which is very important. And please note that there are services like 14410 that will be that can assist you if you do experience such problems. Thank you, friends. Thank you so much for the time spent to enlighten our viewers from across the state. Your contribution towards overcoming fear of COVID-19 is very much appreciated. To end the session, I would like to also give my own take-home message. That is, if you fear, you have already suffered. Lada pitien, pila dep jenjar lupa. Te kublai shibon ya baro kiba la ya don rengkat bat ngi ki parlok kiba ya pleo jingmot hang ni hapo studio kibala pelat yang apor chungki ban pensya ya kipat ba kumno bangin le haba ngidon kam ban sumar ya la kejong jingmut jing perkat haba ya dai bat kani kejing ke bangi ya lengba ka klam COVID-19 kublai shibon good night tiaso.
Ni ban ngam so shat na do nen ka si ngam thlai ba ngam sa shat tang ba ngam so pheri ai
Chayo.
na so telot na smo so kriat na thlai ngadan kam le check up
Kapan toy mele check up. Kapan toy. Saja mi. Kani kadai ke jeng kelak sun beneng.
ni ban jerho da kisngi bat ka kriat ngadan kam le check up pe ya ka to ka phone udan u helpline number ba ong ti kong asam ni
Onam le bakla kembali mangamo. Ada mapi ni manu nak yeng jong pi. Kidon ka jeng sitom. Kum kejar ho kesit penhiar sumuthaj duna ka jeng ring mensem duna ki bor jeng mat ki bor jeng sma si sendan kedai masat slung ilade. Pat kedai malik test no ilade no COVID-19. Deng artli ki mas hayeng ru at ong ikbah hayeng bakin le kumju.
ngadan bok bangalayo jengkat nai shem kabu tes ladi bat wat jing rap kerke lada dan kam haba fidan kum kanu ke jingpang ken mau ke jing semari ladi ka de ka dawai
Issued in public interest by National Health Mission, Government of Meghalaya.